Welcome to Saving America. This is your host, Dr. David D. Schein, clown editor from The Atlantic, accidentally on a text stream of Trump administration security folks. Unless you're living under a rock, I'm sure you've heard one of the 20 versions of this story. Recently, one of the first confabs of the whole Trump security crew, plus VP Vance, were on a text on Signal. The discussion involved getting ready to do something that the world has needed for years, to bomb the Houthi terrorists in Yemen into history. Somehow, Jeffrey Goldberg, editor of the fading magazine The Atlantic, got looped into the text stream. He made a big deal out of how it was horrible that someone without security clearance was somehow able to get into the text stream. I do not disagree with that simple point. I do note that I was introduced to The Atlantic in high school as a literary magazine. My regular audience will not be surprised that I was advanced English in high school. I also introduced to the New Yorker as a similar magazine. Well, that was a long time ago. Today, both are regarded as mere woke trash, having sold out long ago. Given the Dems have nothing but complaints, nothing positive, the Dem liars and fools show in D.C. went into hyperdrive. And as luck would have it, security updates were scheduled before Congress at this time. So SignalGate was born. There have been calls by the Dems for the resignation of Mike Waltz as the national security advisor. Trump intelligently said Waltz learned his lesson and let's move on. That is the correct answer. Lost in all this talking is the bombing of the Houthis, which was the subject of the test, was very successful. And I think this was the third or fourth consecutive night that they were leveling that part of Yemen to get rid of this scourge of the earth. Now, the security team that was on that call said there were no confidential details discussed before Goldberg. I take their word for that, but I would say that there was more discussed than I would like to have exposed to someone like Goldberg. Certainly, given Trump's public announcement of the planned bombing and other recent bombing runs, nothing stunning was discussed here. Goldberg, of course, didn't like being spanked, so he has exaggerated the level of detail he is privy to. I note that I'm unable to read specifically what he wrote since it's behind a paywall, and I surely won't give a penny to The Atlantic. As I've already said in prior webcasts, the Trump team is a credit to the United States. The worst person in his new administration leadership team is far better than the best member of the Biden-Harris administration. So no, I do not consider that the sky is falling. While unhappy, I am more unhappy with the ridiculous time-wasting show that has been brought about by the Dems. What nobody has said so far, why would the phone number of this clown Goldberg have been available to the security team to even invite him to this chat? I cannot imagine why his number was anywhere around. In fact, I believe this sounds like the famous leak from 2 years ago of the abortion decision at the Supreme Court. I want to know how Goldberg's phone number was even in the system. That should be the real question here. Here's my analysis on punishment. Hillary Clinton had a reported 65,000 emails sent from her home computer server. This was a massive and deliberate security violation. If you will imprison her for the rest of her life without parole, I will let you smack Mike Waltz's hand for an error during his first couple weeks on the job. FMCS fraud highlighted. The level of fraud and waste at the Federal Mediation and Conciliation Service is stunning and makes some of the early reports of waste by the federal government pale in comparison. The details indicate that employees openly admitted that they did nothing. Vast sums were spent on luxurious offices. I always thought this was an important operation in dealing with national union strikes, but apparently that was not true. This incredible disclosure by itself shows that the Dems protesting the DOGE cleanup operation are on the wrong side of history. Speaking as just one taxpayer, I want not only terminations, but I want investigations into possible criminal charges. Commies oppose the Department of Education closing. As a professional educator, some of my audience might be surprised that I support closing the Department of Education. Major protests are by the teachers' unions, not the overtaxed and underserved taxpayers. Note that. First, education is a responsibility of parents and local schools. Failed President Jimmy Carter created the department as a throwaway to the unions. Second, many reports have documented that American student levels are now near the bottom of all developed countries. Some whole school districts have no students meeting education standards. So if that was the purpose of the DOE, it has failed on a massive scale. Time to tell the schools to dump woke and DEI and get back to the 3 R's. Third, the few DOE operations of merit can be assigned to other departments like Treasury and the Small Business Administration. I'm okay with targeted support for poorer school districts, but consider that there are still states administration between Uncle Sam and these local districts. Pell Grants and similar elite programs like that might even go to the State Department. Think about that. I have a great college students. I asked my class of 35 seniors last week how many had read the great American classic Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck. Not a single student out of 35. Classics like this were required reading when I was in high school. Time to get back to basics like reading and writing real material. The real Chinese threat to the Panama Canal. I want to credit Virginia Allen of the Daily Signal for a fascinating and important article on the Chinese threat to the Panama Canal. Miss Allen's piece credited Hot Zone podcaster, former military member, and someone who actually lives in Panama, Chuck Holton, for his critical evaluation of the threat. Recently, there's been a lot of publicity about China locating operations at each end of the Panama Canal, and this is how it presents a direct threat to American security. Remember that failed President Carter gave the canal away during his administration. However, just controlling the software that runs the canal could have far more devastating results. I think this is an important issue for U.S. throughout the world. I was alerted to this mega threat a few years ago when I learned that many of the cranes that operate in major ports throughout the U.S. came from China. That includes the computerized operating systems. So China could shut down our ports. As part of our Saving America series, I called on the appropriate powers to make sure these systems are converted to U.S. secure systems. Allen's article notes that on average, 36 to 38 ships traverse the canal each day, including U.S. Navy ships. Of the civilian ships, most are bound for U.S. ports, but not all are U.S. flagged vessels. A shutdown of the canal would have a major impact on U.S. shipping, including, importantly, the U.S. Navy. Texas Governor Abbott responds to Dem lawmakers' hateful remarks. The latest scumball Dem to gain publicity for stupidity is Texas Representative Jasmine Crockett. She doubled down on stupid by referring to Texas Governor Abbott, who has been in a wheelchair for about 40 years, as Governor Hot Wheels. She said this at a recent Human Rights Campaign dinner. Abbott said that he found the remark disrespectful. As a typical out-of-touch Dem, she claimed it was because he wants to block illegals from entering the U.S., not his disability. Then when Abbott's supporters called her out, she attacked them, not apologizing for her own insensitivity about human rights. Race-based policy goes to SCOTUS. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 was passed to protect the rights of minority voters throughout the states. It was originally targeted at the vestiges of the Jim Crow laws in the Democrat-controlled South. It also banned the poll tax, another tool the Dems used to keep blacks from voting. However, not everything has been smooth. In an effort to provide more representation for minorities, states have gerrymandered many congressional districts to create black districts. These attempts have repeatedly been brought before the courts. In fact, I have a personal friend who was an expert who testified in such cases over the years. About 20 years ago, this backfired in the Houston area when a so-called black district was won by a white Democrat, not a black one. Currently, there is a battle brewing at the effort to create a second predominantly black district in Louisiana. That state is approximately 30% African American. Unbelievably, this is now before SCOTUS for the third time, this time to see if the creation of the second black district violated the Constitution's Equal Protection Clause for non-black voters. Given that this is overtly race-based, does it now violate the concept of equal protection? Given the diversity of modern society and the growth of minority representation in the Republican Party, it is time to stop showing this specific form of race preference. The Roberts Supreme Court has tended toward a balance with favoring elimination of affirmative action, but less aggressive on targeted voting districts. So right now, this looks like a toss-up. Our series Interviews for Saving America establishes that the world is full of interesting people. Once you hear from our next guest, I'm sure you will agree that he deserves the moniker of interesting person. Saving America welcomes Joel Gardner. He is the president of the Jefferson Council, a special organization at the University of Virginia. Joel is a graduate of UVA twice with his BA and then his law degree. In full disclosure, I also hold 2 degrees from UVA. While at UVA, he distinguished himself by being part of organizations like Phi Beta Kappa, Z Society, and the Raven Society. After a stint in the Army, he enrolled in law school where he was an editor of the Law Review and a member of the The Order of the Coif, a truly distinguished record. After law school, he initially practiced law with a major Wall Street law firm, then segged into investment banking, where he spent the next 30 years as a corporate finance banker specializing in transactions with the Pacific Basin. However, Joel never truly left the university. He served on 4 university boards, including being a founding member of the Rotunda Society board. He's chaired more than a half dozen fundraising efforts, most recently served on the university's committee on free expression and free inquiry. He's been a UVA parent twice and is the author of From Rebel Yell to Revolution, which tells the story of the momentous 4 years from 1966 to 1970 while he was an undergrad at UVA. In another interesting parallel, I'm currently working on a book called A Cheap Education about my 4 years in college at a very different school, 1969, 1973. He's traveled around the country giving book talks to numerous UVA alumni clubs. He also published a number of articles dealing with UVA for the James G. Martin Center for Academic Renewal. Joel is actively involved in the creation of the Jefferson Council, served on its first executive committee, and he's now returned as new role as president of the Jefferson Council. Hey, we had to shorten his bio so we'd have time for the interview itself. We welcome Joel Gardner for his first appearance on Saving America.
Thanks, David. Really great to meet you.
Well, we're so looking forward to having you join us today. As you know, we ask our guests 3 broad questions. The first is, of all the universities in America, why would it be important to focus on free speech at the University of Virginia?
Well, UVA is really a unique institution, and we can start off with the fact that it has its 2 founders, not only presidents of the United States and founding fathers, but also authors of 2 of the most revered documents in Western civilization. Thomas Jefferson, the author of the Declaration of Independence, and James Madison, the author of the Bill of Rights and the First Amendment. And because of that incredible, unique situation, I think most UVA graduates over the years has looked back to those 2 founders as people to emulate. Current history has reversed some of that, as these 2 incredible minds have been judged by the mores of current society rather than the time they lived. But when Jefferson founded the university, and he was the main founder, it was his child, one of the things he said, at this institution, we will not be afraid to follow the truth wherever it may lead. And that is something that was always part and parcel, I think, of our education at UVA. And the other unique aspects of the university, like its grounds, which they call it instead of the campus.
That's right.
Designed by Jefferson and are the only UNESCO World Heritage Site in North America. Things like that bind us. And UVA has always had a very, very strong feeling of camaraderie amongst its students and a very, very strong cultural bond amongst the students. That cultural bond has been, in my opinion, shredded over the past decade. And we can get into that. But the First
Yes.
Amendment is key. And the Jeffersonian legacy of civil debate is part and parcel of UVA. So I think we are a unique institution, and our legacy is freedom of expression. I don't think there's any other university that can match that.
Absolutely. And so what has happened to free speech on so many university campuses, including UVA? Why is it so critical to turn that around now, to face it right now?
I think it's not difficult to pinpoint it. And it really all comes back to the politicization of our college campuses. I mean, for I think most of the history of higher education, the foremost purpose was education, starting probably more than a decade ago. And it started well before, but it really picked up speed in the mid-2000s and really became the most important part of the academia after around 2010 was indoctrination. And it was indoctrination in a social justice policies and an agenda. And I think people now will put a term on it, and it really was the DEI movement, diversity, equity, and inclusion. I wrote an article about it 3 or 4 years ago. It's been in the press a lot recently. I think I called that out a lot earlier. I wasn't the first one. There's a brilliant article by the former dean of the Yale Law School, Dean Kronman, called The Downsides of Diversity. It was published in the Wall Street Journal. And basically, I mean, there's a lot in there, but one of the major points he made is that DEI, as applied on college campuses, is not an academic ideal, but a political movement. And that's exactly what it was. And what makes it most troublesome is that the concept of DEI is not what those words mean. Diversity,
True. Absolutely.
and inclusion. Diversity means the diversity of many things, but not the most important diversity, which is diversity of thought.
Yes.
That has been given total short shrift on college campuses. You can read the works of Jonathan Haidt, who is a prior professor at UVA, is now up at NYU. But there was very little diversity of thought amongst in academia, amongst both the administrations and the faculty. Equity means equality of and final, I'd cut for a second, but it's equality of result and not equality of opportunity.
Absolutely.
And inclusion has meant just the opposite. Inclusion has not meant the inclusion of all groups. It's meant the inclusion of certain groups which are deemed to be marginalized and which, in fact, today run the universities both at a faculty, administrative, and student level. But it's not been inclusion, and it's not been inclusivity. And I've seen it very much at UVA, where we had such a close bond, where there was a great community amongst faculty, students, administrators. It really was an amazing place. And now it's divided. It's been fractured, and it's divided by identity groups. And it's broken my heart to see that, because I think, as you kind of detailed in my biography, UVA has been in my heart and soul since I stepped on the grounds in 1966, never truly left it. And it's really terrible to see what's become of the community, the sense of community and camaraderie there.
Well, it's interesting for us in my approach here in Saving America, because we interviewed a fantastic young lady. She happens to be up in a college in Maryland. She's a senior now. She was an intern for the Heritage Society this summer, and I happened to cross her because she wrote a brilliant article. I had no idea it was written by a college junior. And I interviewed her. She's Asian American, and she was so critical of DEI. She said, I want to be respected for who I am and my accomplishments and my intellectual ability. I don't want to be considered something because I'm Asian or female. And she just gave such a compelling presentation on where DEI has failed, but not just I think our academia, but our society in general. So anyway, so we've been on this streak for a while, and we've interviewed two different professors on this same subject. We interviewed a professor who was fired from a university in Bakersfield, California, because he spoke out for conservative causes. And before he was fired, by the way, I got a chance to go out and speak on that campus. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And then I just interviewed Amy Wax, who you may have crossed her name. It's so interesting because I'm a Penn alum, and she was incredibly penalized. If she didn't have tenure, she'd be out on the street. But they have done some rather incredible things to her for being critical of DEI while being a professor at Penn. So it is interesting to see how things are going. FBI agent arrested at the airport trying to leave the USA. I like it when the good guys win. In this case, somehow it's fitting that an anti-Trump FBI agent, Jonathan Boomer, got arrested at New York's JFK airport as he tried to skip out of the USA. He has been charged with leaking confidential information. Reportedly, he copied and released over 100 confidential files. He was not in custody since he was out on $100,000 bail. Glad someone was paying attention and caught him before he could leave the U.S. More climate change hypocrisy. This was inspired by a report by the BBC. So the short version is that in November, there is going to be a huge world climate change summit called COP30. It will be held in the Brazilian city of Belém. This is a historic city in northern Brazil that is considered the gateway to the Amazon. It has a population of about 1.3 million, with about 2.5 million in the metro area. Incredibly, it is projected as many as 50,000 people would attend this summit in this Brazilian city. So they are demolishing a swath of the Amazon rainforest to build a 4-lane highway. This could impact tens of thousands of acres, according to the BBC report. As is often asked by us realists, is this a sensible way to even review the issue of climate change? The rainforest does absorb carbon for the world, of course, but I don't think 4-lane highways do the same trick. The continued failure of the bureaucratic state is documented by the rising cost of Obamacare. Folks, these are some really scary numbers. I note that during the first 2 years of the Trump administration, this fraud on the people should have been repealed, but it wasn't. It was a failure of the GOP that this act still exists. The federal subsidies are, of course, out of control as expected. The Congressional Budget Office, which is supposedly neutral, estimated in its revised 10-year budget forecast that these subsidies would cost $1.3 trillion over the next decade. And expansion of Medicare will cost another incredible $1.4 trillion. Folks, we're already broke. Where is this money going to come from? Don't use blue mailboxes. More signs of a degraded society and failures by the United States Postal Service. This one was prompted by a report by Dave Basner regarding a USPS press release actually telling hundreds of millions of USPS customers to avoid using the official blue mailboxes. There were over 130,000 blue mailboxes across the country. Now, the abject failures at the USPS have issued a warning to Americans who plan to use the collection boxes that they might not be safe to use. As an American who had 2 mail checks stolen in the last 18 months, I am certainly sensitive to the cumulative failures of the Postal Service. The Postal Service explains that the boxes are attractive to thieves hoping to steal checks or identities, especially at specific times and on specific days. Quoting, "The biggest variable enticing these criminals to steal are customers depositing mail into the blue collection boxes after the last collection of the day or during Sundays and federal holidays. The Postal Service has some advice. If customers simply use retail service or inside wall drops to send their U.S. mail instead of depositing it to sit outside overnight or through the weekend, blue collection boxes would not be as enticing after business hours to mail thieves for identity theft and check washing schemes." And again, I've just been a victim of both. Adding, "The most secure way to send mail is through local post office retail counter. If that's not feasible, the next safest way is to use the inside collection slots that deposit mail directly into the post office." Hey, how about something called Zelle? Yeah, folks, I am doing everything I can not to mail checks at all in light of what's happened to me over the last 18 months. Hey, Postal Management, how about providing video security and alarms on those blue boxes? How about aggressive prosecution of criminals and mandatory prison sentences of 5 years or more for each incident? How about doing your jobs more efficiently? My article from summer 2023 in the American Thinker titled "End the Postal Service Con Job" might steer things in the right direction. No sympathy for the Postal Service. They need to do a better job and a more economical, better job. 7-Eleven to close 444 North American stores. This is Dr. David D. Schein for Saving America with a special report. And this is a perverse bit of bad news. While closing stores, which means laying off workers, is never a positive, there is more to this story. First, here is the headline: 444 underperforming 7-Eleven stores will close. 7-Eleven and the other major national convenience store chains, Circle K, dominate the C-store market, as it is called. 7-Eleven has 13,000 stores in the USA and Canada and is owned by a Japanese company. That company operates 4,500 stores in 19 countries and territories. I discovered some surprising details when one drills down into the story. The company reported that inflation and a drop in same-store sales was the trigger for this business decision. It also noted that it is more expensive today to operate stores, and I think we could all have figured that one out. Basically, the lower and middle income people, the ones who shop at the 7-Elevens, have less money to spend. This is impacting the store sales. More interesting, the 6-decade movement to eliminate smoking due to its health risks is having a major impact on the convenience stores. 7-Eleven specifically highlighted the declining tobacco sales. Tobacco use has fallen 26% compared just to 2019. The company provided that information. Cigarettes make up 21.5% of total convenience store sales in 2023, so still a significant piece in that market. Convenience stores are a major source for all of the tobacco products, accounting for about 70% of their total sales overall. Part of this may be due to the much reduced sales, if not completely dropping sales of cigarettes by other types of stores, meaning that people are being pushed into the C-store market because they cannot buy cigarettes in grocery stores and some other stores that have stopped carrying them altogether. And what the 7-Eleven does say is they are going to replace that by trying to have more of their store branded products. And of course, virtually all of us know about the famous Slurpee, the 7-Eleven branded drink product. This announcement ties in with many other retailers either reducing the number of stores or filing for bankruptcy. Data for this piece was obtained from multiple sources, including Reuters News. Business students, business persons, or consumers, business law impacts much of what you do. This segment is designed to help you get past the headlines on key stories. DHS asked the Supreme Court to uphold cancellation of a visa over a sham marriage. In an unusual report covered by the Epoch Times, the Department of Homeland Security, DHS, has asked the U.S. Supreme Court to confirm the cancellation of a visa based on a sham marriage. In the United States, one of the more direct ways to gain legal status in the U.S. is, of course, to marry a U.S. citizen. The facts are a bit complicated. DHS rescinded the immigrant visa of non-citizen Ayaya Hamaya. He is married to Amina Bonafara, who is a U.S. citizen. He is to have fathered 3 children with Amina, all of whom are U.S. citizens in turn. The rub is that the DHS determined that Hamaya has attempted to pass off his prior marriage as legit in order to obtain a green card. Aha. However, that marriage was apparently not legit. Therefore, he was found to have engaged in fraud. This caused a domino effect of the current marriage to Buafara being deemed fraudulent. As a consequence, his visa, which had been approved by DHS, has now been revoked. The legal aspect behind this is interesting. DHS took the position that its ruling is discretionary, which means that it cannot be challenged in court. There is a split of authorities of the federal courts of appeal on whether discretionary decisions like this can be reviewed by the courts. So far, the U.S. District Court and then the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals have both ruled in favor of DHS. So the wife, or mother, if you will, has appealed to SCOTUS, where the case will be presented for the October docket. Now, keep in mind, SCOTUS hears very few of the many cases presented to it. However, the fact that there is a split of the circuit courts means that the High Court will probably hear it. However, the justices could also make a quick ruling upholding the prior 2 federal courts and not having a hearing. Frankly, as much as I hate people violating the law, I do not like to hear 3 children being denied a father, since he would be here illegally and therefore likely deported if DHS's determination is upheld. I wonder if there's an alternative punishment for this person. That is, if this man is otherwise a law-abiding citizen in more than a decade that he's been in the United States. Watch for ruling in this case. Social Security distributed almost $72 billion in improper payments, according to the agency's Office of Inspector General, that is OIG. The OIG said that the Social Security Administration made nearly $72 billion worth of improper payments over a period of 7 years, with almost a third yet to be recovered. This comes at a time when the national debt is at a record level, and it is projected that Social Security itself will run out of money by around 2030. The OIG stated SSA issues over $1 trillion in benefit payments annually. Even the slightest error in the overall payment process can result in billions of dollars in improper payments. From fiscal year 2015 through 2022, SSA paid almost $8.6 trillion in benefits and made approximately $71.8 billion, or 0.84%, in improper payments, most of which, of course, were overpayments. The agency still had outstanding, get this, folks, $23 billion in uncollected overpayments at the end of fiscal year 2023. The OIG claims that SSA has taken actions to remedy the situation. I certainly hope so. Assistant Inspector General for Audit Michelle L. Anderson added that without better access to data, increased automation, systems modernization, and policy or legislative changes, improper payments will continue to be a major challenge for SSA into the future. That's certainly not comforting. As a taxpayer, including paying thousands of dollars a year into Social Security, I find this statement troubling. The SSA does claim that it is developing an information exchange to access wage data from payroll data processors to reduce payment errors. And the agency initiated a review of its overpayment procedures, systems, and communications to identify areas where improvements can be made. The report noted that even though overpayments might be viewed as a gift, for people who are living on Social Security, being told that they have to give back some of the money so that this can be a real hardship for them. And I can understand that, of course. Hopefully, some of our elected representatives will take action to remedy this situation now and not later. Boar's Head, a popular and expensive brand of lunch meats and cheese, among other products, is facing major legal issues due to a listeria outbreak. Anyone who shops at Kroger and other major supermarkets is aware of the Boar's Head brand. According to Wikipedia, the family business behind it is Boar's Head Provision Company, also known as Boar's Head Brand, or the Frank Brunkhorst Company, who is one of the two founders of the company back in 1905 in Brooklyn, New York. It has been based in Sarasota, Florida since 2001. Per the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the company recalled 7 million pounds of deli meats after a liverwurst sample collected in Maryland tested positive for listeria. This is a disease-causing bacteria. The meat may have come from the company's plant in Jarrett, Virginia. Health inspection reports violations of federal regulations, including mold, liquid dripping from ceilings, and meat and fat residue in many areas. Production at the plant was stopped in late July. The plant has now been linked to the deaths of at least 9 people and hospitalizations of about 57 others in 18 different states. A class action lawsuit was filed in the United States District Court for the Eastern District of New York in early August. The lawsuit alleges that Boar's Head improperly, deceptively, and misleadingly labeled and marketed its products. Reportedly, the first lawsuit was a wrongful death lawsuit in Sarasota County, Florida. At least one other lawsuit is reported in Minnesota, likely to be more. Now, various cases can be filed in each of the states where deaths or illnesses occur. However, it is likely that there may be an agreement to consolidate the cases into one court, since the evidence is likely to be similar in these cases. In any event, this could be very, very costly for this company. It is too soon to tell if bankruptcy may be required. I mention that due to the fact that even though this is a billion-dollar company in revenue, the problem has substantial claim potential. The Boar's Head case reminds me of Bluebell ice cream, the very popular Texas ice cream brand. In 2015, a listeria outbreak was reported. The resulting shutdown and recall was devastating to the company. Further, criminal charges resulted in that case, since it was alleged that Bluebell's head had hidden some of the problems after they were discovered. 10 people were sickened and 3 died in that case. Some of the civil claims are still pending, but the criminal cases have been resolved with the payment of millions of dollars in fines. The EU scores a $14.3 billion court win against Apple, along with a multi-billion-dollar award against Google. And what has become a common headline over the last 10 years or so, the European Union seems to like to go after successful American technology companies. For instance, there have been substantial antitrust rulings against Microsoft in the past by the EU. According to a report carried by Newsmax, the EU's top court made 2 major rulings separately involving Apple and Google. The European Court of Justice ruled that Apple must pay 13 billion euros, which is equivalent to $14.3 billion. And that's in back taxes to Ireland. This related to a heavy discount on the taxes provided by Ireland back in 2016. Under the EU's calculation, Ireland allowed Apple to pay a tax rate of 1% of its European profits, and then it dropped it to 0.005% by 2014. This ruling was a rare win for the EU, which has faced problems defending its tax enforcement moves in recent years. It lost previous cases against Amazon and Starbucks. Then the court also upheld a 2.4 billion euro fine against Google, part of a string of high-profile EU competition cases targeting that company. In the Google case, the allegation was that their search engine favored its own services versus other providers. The EU move on Google is parallel to the current antitrust action against Google in the United States for monopolizing behavior with its dominant search engine. The US is also after Apple for restricting who can utilize its proprietary app software. However, the underlying issue in these two recent rulings may be an attempt by the EU to gain an advantage for its struggling tech companies. A recent report in Euronews indicates that the 7 largest US tech companies, Alphabet, which is Google, Amazon, Apple, Meta, Microsoft, NVIDIA, and Tesla, are 20 times bigger than EU's 7th largest and generate more than 10 times more revenue. So our third question is, what is the purpose of the Jefferson Council and how has its work to date improved the matter of free speech at UVA, and what more needs to be done in this regard?
Okay. Jefferson Council was formed over 3 years ago by a group of alumni who saw what was going on at the university and was very concerned. I think anybody who was focused on life at the university and had an interest, whether you were an alum or a faculty member or a parent, I could see that there was what I would call a free speech suppression. And this, it wasn't suppression by fiat, it was suppression de facto. And that suppression was if you did not agree with the agenda that was being propagated virtually on a daily basis on the grounds, you were going to be marginalized and you were going to be attacked on social media, and students were afraid to speak up in class. And just to show that that's, I think, what a lot of us were seeing, but that was in essence, there was not intellectual diversity. There was a fear of people from moderate conservative to more strongly conservative speaking up on the grounds. And the group saw that, as well as attacks on our founder, Thomas Jefferson, who's known as Mr. Jefferson in Charlottesville and on the grounds. But, you know, we all recognize he, like no other human, was a perfect human being, that his contributions, not only to our university, but to our nation and Western civilization, far exceeded, you know, his, what in today's world is considered, you know, and should be considered to be failings in terms of the social contract. But it wasn't in his day. And as I said, you know, his contributions far surpassed that. And he was revered on grounds. And I think a lot of the attacks on the Jeffersonian legacy, not only him as a person, but his, what I'd mentioned before, his mandate that the truth be followed, no matter where it may lead. That just wasn't the case anymore. The truth wasn't being followed, the agenda was being followed. And so these alumni got together. We had a number of pillars. I mean, free expression and diversity of thought was one. The Jeffersonian legacy was another. The integrity of the Jefferson grounds was another, which is, of course, distinct to UVA. And the fourth was our honor system, which was a revered part of tens of thousands of UVA graduates for over a century, and which was in the process and has continued to be eviscerated to an extent that it's barely recognizable to what it was. But I think if you asked what most students remember from their time at UVA, it was the concept of honor and the importance of being an honorable person. More important than wealth, more important than success was being a person of honor and integrity. And that was imbued in us back then. And it was not even slowly, it was quickly being frittered away. So that was another one of our mandates. But those were sort of the founding principles. As time went on, we grew in numbers. We've got over 3,000 members today, people concerned about the university. And I think we've played an amazing role in helping to foster intellectual diversity and freedom of speech. And we've done that in a number of ways. First, we brought many speakers, well-known speakers, moderate, conservative speakers on grounds. We had Vice President Pence. We had George Will. We've had academic speakers like Heather McDonald. And I think we brought people to the grounds that never would have been here if it wasn't for us. Secondly, and I think very, very importantly, is we have focused granularly on events on the grounds and have shined the light of day on them and have educated the university community to how freedom of expression and fairness to all students has been abused. And I think that would have gone uncommented on if we hadn't been out there willing to hear from students and faculty members about what was going on. They felt comfortable speaking to us, and we brought that to the public. And I think that's had a lot of consequence. I can tell you the formation of the Free Speech Committee that I served on was very much in response to some of the writings I did to the public. At that time, interestingly, I had also said the university should adopt the Calvin Committee principles on the university not taking institutional views on political and social matters. That was deep-sixed by the powers that be at the time. And now just recently, they suddenly discovered how important that is, not to be commenting on public affairs because they came under quite a lot of scrutiny and bad publicity.
Yes.
But I think perhaps those were two ways in which I think we have fostered trying to have a level playing field for the free expression on grounds, is that we've had the back of individual students, student groups, and faculty, and I think have given them the courage and the comfort for them to come out and speak, knowing we are there to back them up, when before, in many ways, they would have been criticized and in certain ways had, because it's true, had actions taken against them. I mean, there's certain individual students in the stories. I mean, I could go on for the next half hour talking about how individual students have been mistreated in abominable ways by the administration in that regard. And it's important for people to know, because any parent that would learn of some of that stuff, and most alumni that would learn of that, would be horrified. And I think part of the problem is that most alumni are not aware of what is going on. The administration tells its story. They tell a wonderful story. They have multi-million-dollar PR departments behind them. And most people hear certain things that come out in the university official statements and take that as fact and don't understand that what's going on. And just as it happens today, I think it was last night or very recently on the Joe Scarborough show, and he's not a particularly conservative commentator. His daughter goes to UVA. And he came out with a comment saying how terrible that his daughter came home and basically said that if you come out and speak openly against what is the common agenda there, the common adopted thought, that you're marginalized, you're attacked, and as a result, students just basically sit in class and are afraid to speak up. That just came out. You can find that online. But that's the truth, and people don't understand it. It's denied by the administration, because if you believe what they say and the positions they take, you'd never know it. But they talk the talk and they don't walk the walk, which is why an organization like the Jefferson Council is so important, not only to the University of Virginia, it's important to universities across the country. And now there are many, many groups similar to UVA. There's a group called AFSA, which I think now is 26, 27 similar groups to the Jefferson Council around the country, we were one of the founding members, 5 or 6 founding members, and they're around the country. But it is a problem. I mean, this is a definite problem, not only at universities, this is K through 12. If you go,
yes, absolutely.
Their indoctrination has replaced education as the ground stone of education.
And it's killing us, and it's really been so difficult. I'm university professor, as I think you know, and I have seen a dramatic decline in the quality of our students coming into our colleges, and we have lost the focus in K through 12 of very basic skills is reading, writing, and arithmetic. And I know it sounds so, 18th century to talk about the 3 R's, but I've got a student who's a sophomore in college, supposed to write a paper on philosophy. It came by one of the committees I serve on, and he didn't know how to write a paper, did not know how to write a research paper. And this is someone who's in a private college where I teach. And it's like, what happened? What are we doing over there? These should not be political inculcation centers. And even if you are a political inculcation center, at least teach them how to read and write and how to, put sentences and paragraphs and things together. That's why I was so impressed with our visitor from the Heritage Society, the summer intern, because her writing was clear and positive. She was a great speaker, and it's like, where are the rest of these college students today? And I would say UVA, where I taught while I was working on my doctorate in the early 2000s at the McIntire School of Business, I can tell you it was a very good experience for me because the students were articulate and on top of things. But I know things since that was about the year 2003. I know things have declined since then on the campus because of this extreme pressure towards DEI.
Well, Dave, it's not only that, it's not only the failure to inculcate the basics into our students, like being able to write in a manner in which people can understand, put more than 2 or 3 sentences together. They don't teach history anymore. I mean, there was a history requirement when I was an undergrad. There's no history requirement. A lot of people graduate having no knowledge of our own American system, of our own American history. Forget about world history or Western civilization is now a horrible concept, to many of the people with the agenda. I mean, it's just terrible. I mean, the fact that I'm the son of an immigrant who escaped the czar at the turn of the last century, came over here, grew up in extreme poverty on the Lower East Side. I mean, to live in a society that has created more freedom and more wealth than any society in the history of the world is a blessing. And it's something that every student should understand. Without this country, without America, without our history, without our traditions, without our freedoms, there are tens of millions of people who would have suffered horrible existences. Hundreds of millions, probably.
Yes,
I think
hundreds of millions is very safe, and we've developed so much. And Joel, we could do this for hours, of course, but why don't we conclude with how can our audience get more information about you and about the work of the Jefferson Council?
I think they could, if they really want to know about me, they could read my book because they'll know more than they ever need to. But that book really is a commentary on the other period in our recent history, which was somewhat similar to what is going on today. It was during the Vietnam War.
Yes.
when our society was first coming under attack and where the norms were totally under siege. But that was a period when the world turned upside down and went 180 degrees in about 3 years. They can read my articles at the James Martin Center. Could just go online, Google James Martin Center for Academic and Renewal, and read my articles about the politicization of the college campuses and what I call the new McCarthyism at the University of Virginia. The Jefferson Council, I would say just go to our website and just Google the Jefferson Council UVA, and you will find on our website, you can join up, and right there, we publish news stories all the time. We publish stories about what's going on at UVA. You can read a lot of these stories about what's going on around academia and the campus reform and the college fix, which are broad and around the nation. But if you really want to know a granular basis what's going on at Mr. Jefferson's University, the foundation of the American ideals, and following the truth wherever it may lead, you should be reading, sign up and read the Jefferson Council, our blogs on a regular basis. And certainly would love to have people who are interested, who want to see our founders' dreams come true at the university that they started. We are a public university. We're not an elite private university. We have students from all spheres, from all states. Jefferson wanted his university, although a state university, to be representative of the United States. It's a wonderful place. It's a unique institution, and I would certainly hope that those listening would support us in our efforts to really create that level playing field for the free and civil exchange of ideas, which is what a university should be about and what Mr. Jefferson dreamed of.
Thanks for joining me for Saving America. If you have questions or comments, please find me on various social media sites. I'm Dr. David